Every moment that passes creates an alternate timeline. It is only in looking back that you can recognize where, how, and when a change occurred, resulting in the timeline that we exist in now. That one change can be big, it can be small, it can be deliberate, or it can be the result of several bad decisions by several uninformed people completely misunderstanding the appeal of the thing they have in front of them, or how to properly position it in the retail market. Hi, I'm Dan Larson, and this is Maxx Fx. Maxx Fx was a rare, prematurely canceled line of 8-inch action figures from Matchbox in 1989. That single figure to hit shelves was the title character, Maxx Fx, packaged with accessories that changed him into pop horror icon Freddy Krueger. Yes, now, today, looking back, it seems obvious that this was an egregious error in judgment, that it could have even made it as far as the point of manufacture, much less distribution and sale. But this figure was not the intended product, this was not the intended story, and boycotts and angry parents conducting letter writing campaigns was never the intended reception. Max Miracle, Master of Makeup and Special Effects, was originally designed by Mel Birnkrant in 1988. Mel was a lifelong, prolific toy creator who had been working as a designer in the industry since the 1960s. You may know Mel from Ideal Toys' Outer Spacemen, a companion line for Mattel's Major Matt Mason. He's also the owner of the vast and comprehensive, one-of-a-kind Mel Birnkrant collection of Mickey Mouse and comic characters, aka Mouse Heaven. Max Miracle, Master of Makeup and Special Effects, was conceived as a special effects expert who also happens to have a little literal movie magic on his side. And even though it takes place a little later in our story, we're going to go ahead and address the line by the more marketing-friendly, shortened title from here on out, Maxx Fx. Max is a guy who has mastered the art of visual makeup effects, not only for film production, but also for use in real life. He drives a van where he keeps his various costumes and accessories that also functions as a portable movie studio. The van is driven by his partner, Minicam, who also works the camera, lights, and acts as stagehand. Max was essentially a base character body with interchangeable outfits. That's the basic play gimmick, and honestly, nothing new in the world of toys in 1988. Barbie had been doing it since the 1950s, G.I. Joe and Captain Action since the 60s, and Captain Action had licensed outfits to turn him into the most popular characters of the time, like Batman, Spider-Man, Flash Gordon, the Lone Ranger, and Aquaman. But the real unique part of the Maxx Fx concept was that he was specifically a visual effects professional. And even more specifically, he was all about science fiction and horror movies. This is Stan Winston going rogue and turning into a superhero. Yeah, okay, maybe a two-man mobile movie studio run out of a guy's van doesn't get your inner 10-year-old very excited, but consider that Max's makeup effects are actually magic and actually imbue him with the powers of the character whose persona he has adopted. Not only can he look like a wolfman, but he has the powers of a wolfman, which he uses to fight crime. The initial designs for Max's outfits were artistic interpretations inspired by classic movie monsters to avoid any additional licensing fees that would have had to been paid to Universal or any other rights holders. A werewolf, a swamp creature, a caveman, a mummy. But Mel also worked up some designs for the modern monsters of the late 80s and early 90s. Freddy Krueger and Jason Voorhees, as part of the line, would have capitalized on the inclusion of the two famous characters in one line long before a movie featuring both could be a reality. Of course, Nightmare on Elm Street and Friday the 13th were movie series that kids shouldn't necessarily have seen, but were probably familiar with the same way Mel, as a child, had been familiar with Dracula, Wolfman, and Frankenstein. Part of the fun for kids was being scared and learning about the magic behind the scenes used to bring those characters to life. Weird to sell a line of monsters to kids? Perhaps, but what was important to Mel was that these characters were the creation of makeup artists, not that they were real monsters, and that messaging was being communicated to kids through the toys. It was a way to defuse the power of the horror and emphasize the power of the artists. Heck, Monster Squad was released in 1987, which reimagined the classic Universal monsters for the modern audiences at a PG-13 level. Freddy was being featured in his third and fourth feature films. He was at the peak of his rise to pop culture icon. Jason was on his 8th film. Even if kids weren't supposed to have seen the movies, we were very aware of them as pop culture characters. They were as attractive as they were repulsive. The concept was purchased by Matchbox, who immediately began making changes. Mel had intended the line to be 12 inches to allow for maximum detail. He used vintage 1960s G.I. Joe figures when creating the prototype outfits and snap-on makeup accessories. Matchbox, however, had acquired a warehouse full of leftover action figure bodies from the defunct Mego Corporation. Maxx was now significantly shorter and significantly less articulated. Instead of a mobile movie studio in Maxx's van, Matchbox developed a soundstage playset that could be used to store all of Maxx's outfits. Matchbox was worried that a property with generic characters wouldn't sell. They insisted on getting licenses for the Universal monsters. They went back to Mel and asked him to redo his initial concepts more in line with the Universal license and to better fit the now smaller scale of the Mego bodies. But even after fully redesigning the new characters, Matchbox still softened his gruesome characters even more while simultaneously acquiring licenses for, Freddy Krueger and the alien xenomorph. At its public debut at Toy Fair in 1989, the line was at least an echo of the thing that Mel had originally designed. There was a lot of positive energy, and it seemed like, despite the changes, Matchbox was taking the promotion seriously, trying to position Maxx for success. Things changed when Matchbox jumped the line and released a talking 18-inch Freddy Krueger doll ahead of Maxx Fx at retail. Someone, somewhere at Matchbox had decided that the time to capitalize on Freddy Krueger was now. The talking Freddy doll, intended for kids 8 years and up, was met with a firestorm of controversy. Hard to blame the folks at the conservative parents group American Family Association for boycotting this one. The Universal monsters over time had become simplified caricatures of themselves. They had lost all the initial power to scare anyone, probably around the time that they teamed up with Abbott and Costello. Their origins, while terrible, were not the same kind of graphically, horribly traumatizing origin of Freddy Krueger. Classic monsters were generally the victims of curses and bad luck. Freddy's origin involves things that I can't even talk about on this channel without fear of this video getting flagged by YouTube. The AFA conducted a letter-writing campaign urging parents to not only boycott the doll, but Matchbox and everyone who even carried any Matchbox products. It was the end for the 18-inch Freddy doll, for sure, but also for Maxx Fx, whose initial and only release would end up being Maxx as Freddy Krueger. Talking Freddy doll crossed the line. No attempt was made to separate from the character in the films. In fact, it was embraced with dialogue. The idea that Freddy was an interesting visual effect was disregarded, and in its place, Matchbox was selling the idea of 8-year-olds taking a horribly disfigured mass murderer who attacks you while you sleep to bed with them. Today, most action figures are targeted for a slightly older audience than 8 years old, and any license related to Freddy Krueger is clearly marketed to collectors over 18. The existence of that same collector audience back in 1989 may have been enough to keep the line alive, or perhaps even prevent Matchbox from making any changes in the first place. Instead of a 12-inch crime-fighting movie magic master of special effects, Maxx turned into a figure that looks and feels like a knockoff. No longer a superhero, but merely a guy who needs help putting on his Freddy Krueger cosplay, a one-figure line with unrealized potential and action figure oddity. Thank you for watching. Please hit like, hit subscribe if you're not already a subscriber. Thank you to those who already are. If you're in the position to help the channel grow, please visit our Patreon at patreon.com/toygalaxy. Share this video, and please take a few minutes to check out the video interview of Mel Birnkrant by James Gurney. Yes, the James Gurney who painted the Dinotopia books, showing incredible footage of the entire original line of Maxx Fx concepts. And also head over to Mel's own website, melbirnkrant.com, to read the whole story in his own words, with tons of amazing photos, links in the description down below. You did it! Cut!